He discovered her feeding scraps to her children. Rancher sent a full basket and never mentioned again. The sun had just begun to rise over the rolling hills that surrounded the small town. The sky was painted in shades of soft pink and gold, and the first birds of the morning chirped as if celebrating the new day. A cool breeze swept across the fields, rustling the tall grass and carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers and earth. In the distance, the rancher was already awake, moving around his property with the practiced ease of someone who had lived his life in tune with the land. His boots crunched against the gravel path as he walked toward the barn, his eyes scanning the horizon, taking in the familiar sights of fences, grazing cattle, and the rising sun reflecting off the calm water of the pond. As he worked, he noticed movement along the edge of the market street. At first it was nothing more than a shadow, a figure bending and rising, moving with a rhythm that was both hurried and careful. But as he watched more closely, he realized it was a woman, crouched low as she picked up small pieces of discarded food. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered the scraps, placing them into a small cloth bag she carried with her. There was a quiet determination in the way she moved, a careful attention to making sure nothing was wasted, nothing overlooked. She looked tired. Her clothes were worn, patched in places, and dust clung to her shoes as though the road itself had left its mark on her. Yet there was something unyielding in her posture, a sense that, no matter how heavy the day might feel, she refused to let it break her. The rancher's curiosity grew, and he stepped closer, careful to stay hidden behind a row of trees. He didn't want to scare her off or draw attention, but he felt an urge to understand her story, to see what drove someone to live this way. As he observed, he saw that she was not alone. 2 small children trailed behind her, their faces smudged with dirt, their hair tangled from restless sleep or play. Despite their hardships, they laughed quietly, sharing small jokes with each other that only children could understand. They didn't seem aware of the weight their mother carried on her shoulders, and yet the rancher could see that every action of hers was focused on them. Every careful step, every gentle touch, every moment of patience was a testament to her love and dedication. The rancher had lived in the area for decades. He had seen many people struggle, but there was something different about this woman. There was dignity in the way she carried herself, even in her struggle. She did not beg or complain. She simply found ways to provide, to make life bearable for her children. And yet, he could see the small moments of desperation hidden in her eyes, the fleeting glances around her as if she feared someone would notice, as if the world might judge her for taking what little she could find. He followed her movements for a while, careful to keep his distance. She gathered small pieces of bread left behind by a baker, a few fruits that had fallen from a stall, and even the leftover vegetables that others had discarded. She inspected each piece, making sure it was safe to feed to her children. The rancher's heart ached as he realized that for this woman, even the smallest scraps of food were precious. He could imagine the long days she must have endured, the nights spent worrying about whether her children would have enough to eat. The children played quietly nearby, their laughter sometimes mingling with soft sighs of hunger that the rancher could see in the way their small bellies sometimes rumbled. But despite it all, there was joy. The mother made sure of that. She smiled at them, spoke to them gently, and even found ways to make the meager food she had into something magical. To anyone else, it might have seemed pitiful, but to those who knew the depth of love behind her actions, it was extraordinary. The rancher couldn't help but remember his own childhood, the days when his family had struggled but somehow found ways to support one another. He remembered the feeling of small kindnesses that had made a world of difference, the neighbor who shared milk, the farmer who gave a few extra eggs, the teacher who offered encouragement when hope seemed far away. Watching this woman, he felt a deep recognition of that same spirit, the determination to care for family no matter the circumstances. Time passed and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The woman finished collecting the scraps and began the slow walk home. The rancher followed at a distance, careful not to reveal himself, but unable to tear his eyes away. He watched as she carefully divided the food into portions, making sure each child received their share. Her attention to detail, the careful way she ensured nothing went to waste, struck him. Here was someone who had so little, yet gave so much of herself. When she arrived at her small home, a modest structure made of wood with a tin roof, she set down the bag of food and knelt to prepare it. The children helped in their small ways, arranging pieces on plates, washing their hands, and sitting quietly, trusting in their mother's care. The rancher could see the relief on her face as she watched her children begin to eat. For a moment there was peace. For a moment the burdens of the world seemed lighter, if only slightly. He felt a stirring of emotion he hadn't expected. There was admiration, certainly, but also a deep empathy. Here was a person who, despite all odds, had refused to let life's hardships define her. She was strong, resourceful, and above all, compassionate. The rancher realized that the small gestures she made for her children were not just about survival. They were about love, hope, and the belief that even in difficult circumstances, one could still find ways to nurture and protect those they cared about. As he turned to leave, he carried with him the image of the mother and her children, the quiet dignity of their struggle, and the simple joy that they had managed to preserve despite everything. He did not know her name, did not know her story in full, but he felt that he had witnessed something important, something that deserved recognition not in words, but in action. For the rancher, that morning marked the beginning of a thought that would not leave him. It was a thought about kindness, about empathy, and about the quiet ways in which one could make a difference without seeking attention or praise. Watching her, he realized that life was not just about grand gestures or loud proclamations. It was about noticing the small struggles, the overlooked moments, and finding ways to make them a little easier. And so, as he returned to his own work, the sun now fully risen, the rancher carried with him a sense of purpose that he had not expected at the start of the day. The memory of the woman feeding her children, of her determination and love, stayed with him. It was a memory that would shape the choices he would make, the actions he would take, and the quiet ways in which he might offer help in the future. Life had not been kind to the woman. Her days were long, filled with hard work and worry, and her nights were even longer, spent lying awake while her children slept, listening to the faint sounds of the wind and the creaking of her small home. The house was modest, just enough to shelter her and her children, but it carried the marks of years of wear. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and the walls were thin enough to let in the sounds of the outside world. Yet, despite its imperfections, it was a place of love, of safety, and of careful planning. Every corner was arranged with thought. Every object had its purpose, even if it was old or patched together. She had been widowed when her children were very young, and since then, every decision she made had been for them. Each morning, she woke before sunrise, preparing whatever meager breakfast she could manage, gathering scraps and hand-me-downs and planning the day in a way that could stretch the little she had into enough to feed her children and keep them clothed. She had learned to be resourceful in ways that most people would never notice. The smallest leftover vegetable could become part of a stew. A few stale pieces of bread could be baked into something more substantial, and a few drops of milk could be shared evenly. Her life was a lesson in creativity, born from necessity. The children, though young, understood their mother's struggles better than most adults would. They didn't complain when there was less food than usual or when their clothes were worn and patched. Instead, they adapted, finding joy in simple things. A sunny day, a shared laugh, a new game invented on the spot. Their laughter often filled the small house, lifting the weight of worry from their mother's shoulders, even if only for a short while. She watched them closely, her heart swelling with love and pride, knowing that despite their hardships, they carried resilience within them. Still, the weight of responsibility was heavy. Sometimes when the children were asleep, she would sit in the quiet of her home and let herself feel the exhaustion that she usually tucked away behind a brave face. There were nights when she cried softly, not out of despair, but because the world seemed unfair, and because she wished she could give her children more. A better home, more food, more security. But even in those moments of vulnerability, she reminded herself of her strength. She had faced challenges before, and she would face them again, for the sake of her children. The town around her was bustling during the day, with vendors shouting to sell their goods, horses clopping along the dirt roads, and townspeople going about their daily routines. Most people were too busy with their own lives to notice her struggle, and she had grown accustomed to keeping her hardships private. There was a quiet pride in managing on her own, a determination to show her children that even when life was difficult, they could survive and even find happiness. She did not want charity. She wanted to provide, to make a life that her children could be proud of. Yet, despite her efforts, there were days when the scarcity of resources made life feel almost unbearable. Sometimes, she would have to make choices between which child got more food, or which necessity could wait until the next day. The decisions weighed heavily on her, but she faced them with courage. She understood that her role was not just to provide for her children's needs, but also to teach them resilience, patience, and gratitude. Every small hardship was an opportunity to teach them a lesson, to show them that even in tough times, one could find a way forward. Her mornings were a flurry of activity. She would rise early, sweep the small floor, fetch water from a nearby well, and prepare what little she had for the day. She would often walk long distances to gather food, check for opportunities to earn a few coins, or find items that could be repurposed. Her hands were calloused from labor, her clothes always carrying the dust and marks of her hard work. But she moved with purpose, knowing that each action she took directly affected the well-being of her children. There was no room for hesitation. Every moment counted. Despite the hardships, there were moments of quiet joy. The children's laughter was a constant reminder of why she continued to push forward, even when the days were long and the nights sleepless. She found joy in small successes, a full day's collection of food, a moment of play with her children, a kind word from a passerby. These moments were like sunlight breaking through clouds, giving her the strength to face the next challenge. She clung to these small victories, knowing that they were what kept her family moving forward. She had friends in the community, though not many. Most people were struggling in their own ways, and while they offered support when they could, resources were scarce. She learned to navigate the social dynamics carefully, asking for help only when necessary and giving what she could in return. She was proud, but not proud to the point of stubbornness. She understood that life was a balance between independence and community, and she worked to maintain that balance every day. One afternoon, as she walked home from the market with the few items she had managed to gather, her children ran ahead, their laughter carrying on the wind. She watched them, her heart both heavy and light. Heavy because she wished she could provide more, and light because of the love and joy that shone in their faces. She knew that despite the challenges, they were safe, they were loved, and they were learning the values of patience, hard work, and gratitude. Her days often ended in quiet reflection. She would sit by the small fireplace, preparing food for the next day or repairing clothes that had worn thin. The children would play nearby, inventing games with simple objects, their imagination transforming the modest home into a world of adventure. In these moments, she allowed herself a small sigh of relief, knowing that despite everything, she was giving her children the most important thing: love, guidance, and a sense of security. And yet, as she rested her head at night, exhaustion pressing down on her, there was always the awareness that tomorrow would bring new challenges. She would rise again, ready to face the day, ready to find food, ready to provide, ready to protect her children from the harsh realities of the world. Her life was not easy, and there were no guarantees, but she carried hope. I would be so happy hope that through her efforts her children would grow strong, capable, and ready to face the world themselves. The rancher, watching from a distance in the morning, could see the outline of her life in these small actions. He saw not just a woman struggling to feed her children, but a mother filled with courage, determination, and an unbreakable spirit. She moved with a quiet grace, turning scarcity into survival and hardship into opportunity. He realized that her story was not one of despair, but of resilience, and in that moment he felt a desire to help, not out of pity but out of respect for the strength he had witnessed. The woman's life was a series of small battles fought every day, against hunger, against fatigue, against the limitations imposed by circumstance, yet she never gave up. She had found ways to turn every challenge into a lesson, every difficulty into a moment of learning, every scarcity into a testament of love. She showed her children that life was not about what you had, but about what you gave and how you faced each day with courage. Even though the world around her often overlooked her struggles, she never let herself be defeated. She carried herself with quiet dignity, facing each day with courage, love, and hope. And it was this quiet strength, this resilience, that caught the rancher's attention and stayed in his mind long after he had left her home. The rancher could not get the image of the woman and her children out of his mind. Every day, as he worked on his land, he thought of them. The sight of her gathering scraps, her careful attention to the children, and the quiet dignity with which she carried her burdens stayed with him like a quiet echo he could not ignore. At first he tried to tell himself it was none of his business. After all, the world was full of struggles, and many people lived difficult lives. But the more he thought about her, the more he realized that he could not simply stand by. He had the means to help. His ranch provided more than enough to feed his own family, and he knew he could spare a little without it making a difference in his life. Yet he did not want to offer charity in a way that would embarrass her or make her feel weak. She was proud, and he respected that. He needed a way to help quietly, without drawing attention to her or creating a sense of obligation. The idea came slowly, almost naturally, like a seed planted in fertile soil. For the next few days, he observed her routine from a distance, careful not to intrude, but wanting to understand her needs. He noticed the small things: how she divided the scraps, which foods the children preferred, the times when she seemed most exhausted. He realized that even a small gesture could make a big difference. Perhaps a basket of food, quietly left at her home, would ease her burden. Perhaps it would allow her to breathe a little, to rest a little, to find hope in a world that often demanded too much from her. One afternoon, after finishing his work with the cattle, the rancher walked to the barn where he kept his supplies. He began to gather items that he thought would help: fresh fruits, bread, vegetables, milk, and a few small treats for the children, things that could make a meal complete and nourishing. He selected everything carefully, making sure the basket would contain enough for several days. As he worked, he thought about her children, imagining the joy in their eyes when they saw the food. The thought warmed him, giving him a quiet satisfaction he had not expected. He considered how to deliver the basket. He did not want to confront her directly, as he did not wish to embarrass her or make her feel indebted. He decided the best approach would be to leave it quietly on her doorstep and retreat before she noticed. It was a simple plan, yet it carried with it the weight of careful consideration. Every decision mattered, because he respected her dignity and wanted to offer help in the kindest way possible. The next morning, he rose before sunrise, as he always did. The sky was pale with the first light, and a gentle fog hung over the fields. He loaded the basket with care, arranging the food so that it would not spill or be damaged during the short walk to her home. The bread was covered, the fruits cushioned, and the milk securely placed. Even small details mattered to him. He wanted the presentation to be neat, respectful, and welcoming. As he walked toward her home, he moved quietly along the dirt paths, careful not to be seen. The town was still asleep, with only the faint sounds of roosters crowing in the distance and the occasional dog barking. The cool morning air carried the scent of fresh earth and grass, and the rancher felt a sense of calm settle over him. He could see her home in the distance, a small structure surrounded by a simple fence, smoke rising faintly from the chimney. The children were still asleep, he hoped, and the timing was perfect. When he reached the home, he placed the basket gently on the doorstep. He made sure it was visible but not intrusive, as if it had appeared there naturally. He stepped back, admiring the careful arrangement, and then turned to leave. His heart felt light, even as he moved away quickly, wanting to give them the surprise without drawing attention. The thought of the children discovering the basket filled him with quiet joy. He could imagine her opening the door, her initial surprise turning into a mix of wonder and gratitude. He did not need her thanks, nor did he seek it. Seeing their needs met, even for a short time, was enough. The rancher knew that this small act, though simple, could make a lasting impact. It could give her a moment of rest, a moment of relief, and a reminder that there was kindness in the world, even in places where life was hard. As he walked back to his own ranch, he thought about the power of small gestures. Life often felt overwhelming, with challenges that seemed impossible to overcome. But sometimes it was the quiet, unseen actions that mattered the most. A simple act of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that were not always visible. The rancher felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing he had done something good without fanfare or recognition. Later that day, as the sun climbed higher, the woman returned from her errands. She noticed the basket immediately, standing neatly at her doorstep. At first she was confused, wondering if someone had placed it there by mistake. But as she looked closer, she realized that the contents were meant for her family. Fresh bread, fruits, vegetables, and other essentials, enough to feed her children for days. Her heart swelled with gratitude, and tears welled in her eyes. She could not understand why someone would show such kindness without asking for anything in return. She brought the basket inside, and the children's eyes lit up as they saw the food. They gathered around, their laughter filling the small home as they explored each item with delight. She watched them, a sense of relief washing over her. For the first time in many weeks, she felt that the weight of survival had lifted, even if only slightly. She could provide a proper meal, and her children could eat without worry. In that moment, the small home felt warmer, brighter, and full of hope. The rancher, back on his own land, thought about the impact of his gesture. He had done what he could, and in doing so, he felt connected to the family in a way that was unexpected. He did not know their names, nor did he need to. The simple act of giving had created a bond, one that was unspoken but meaningful. He felt a quiet pride not in himself, but in the possibility of helping someone carry a little less of life's burden. Over the next few days, he observed the family from a distance, careful not to intrude. He saw how the basket had made a difference. The mother was less hurried, the children laughed more, and the household carried a sense of calm that had been missing before. The rancher realized that while the gesture was small, its effects were significant. It had provided sustenance, certainly, but it had also given hope, comfort, and a reminder that there was kindness in the world. After he worked on the ranch, he realized that many people lived with hidden struggles, and that it was easy to overlook the quiet battles others faced. Helping the woman and her children had reminded him that even small actions could change lives. He thought about how often people walked past struggles without noticing, and how a little attention and care could make a world of difference. The experience stayed with him, shaping the way he viewed kindness and responsibility. He did not see himself as a hero, nor did he expect recognition. He simply understood that when one had the means to help, It was worth taking action, even in small ways. And sometimes, the smallest acts could carry the most meaning, leaving lasting effects that words could not describe. The woman, meanwhile, quietly wondered who had left the basket. She did not know, and she might never know, but she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She carried the memory of that gesture in her heart, teaching her children about the unseen kindness in the world. Every day, as she prepared meals from the basket, she remembered the mystery helper and felt hope for the future. It was a reminder that even in difficult times, there were people who cared, people who noticed, and people willing to act without expecting anything in return. For the rancher, the morning of the basket was only the beginning of a quiet connection that would remain in his mind. He continued his work, tending to the land and the cattle, but the thought of the woman and her children stayed with him. He understood that life was about more than work and routine. It was about noticing the struggles of others, stepping in when one could, and making a difference no matter how small it seemed. And so, the rancher went on with his days, quietly observing, quietly thinking, and quietly acting. His gesture had been simple, yet it carried a weight that touched lives. The woman and her children would not know his identity, but the effect of his kindness would linger in their hearts, a reminder of hope, humanity, and the quiet power of giving. The next morning, the woman woke earlier than usual. The first light of dawn peeked through the thin curtains of her small home, and the birds outside began their cheerful singing. Her children stirred beside her, rubbing their eyes and yawning as they adjusted to the new day. Even in their sleepiness, there was a quiet energy, the kind that only children possess, the ability to find joy and curiosity no matter the circumstances. As she moved about the room, preparing to start her daily chores, her eyes fell on something unusual at the door. At first she thought it might be a simple delivery, perhaps from one of the vendors she knew in the town. But as she stepped closer, she realized it was no ordinary package. A basket, neatly arranged and filled with fresh bread, fruits, vegetables, and other food items, sat on her doorstep. The sight stopped her in her tracks. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she simply stared. She could not understand why anyone would do this for her family. Her first thought was disbelief. Perhaps it was a mistake. Perhaps someone had left it there by accident. But as she examined the basket, she noticed the care that had gone into arranging the food. The bread was covered to keep it fresh, the fruits were placed carefully, and the vegetables looked clean and ready to cook. It was obvious that someone had put thought into this, someone who cared. The children, sensing the excitement in their mother's voice, ran to the door. Their eyes widened as they saw the basket. "Mother, look!" the eldest exclaimed, pointing at the assortment of food. Their faces lit up with joy, and a chorus of laughter filled the small home. It was a sound that carried a sense of relief, happiness, and pure, unfiltered delight. The woman took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She felt a mixture of emotions: gratitude, surprise, and a quiet hope that she had not felt in a long time. She lifted the basket inside, careful not to disturb its contents. She arranged the food on the table, her hands trembling slightly from both excitement and the overwhelming sense of relief. The children crowded around her, their small hands reaching out to touch the fruits and bread, their eyes shining with wonder. For a moment, the room was filled with a rare silence, as if everyone was taking in the significance of the moment. The woman knelt beside her children, holding them close, and whispered softly, "Someone has helped us. Someone cares." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling of kindness she had received. It was a gift that went beyond food. It was a reminder that even in difficult times, the world held people with compassion and generosity. The children began to explore the contents of the basket, their excitement growing with each discovery. One child held up a piece of fresh bread, marveling at how soft and warm it felt. Another examined the fruits, curious about their colors and shapes. They laughed and joked, sharing their discoveries with one another. The mother watched them, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. She realized that this simple act had given her children more than just a meal. It had given them a moment of pure happiness, a memory they would carry with them. She began preparing a small breakfast using the contents of the basket. The bread was sliced and lightly toasted over the small stove. The vegetables were washed and cut, and the fruits were arranged on a plate. The aroma filled the home, creating a sense of warmth and comfort that had been missing for many weeks. The children watched eagerly, their mouths watering, their laughter continuing as they waited for the meal. As they ate, the woman thought about the mystery of the basket. Who could have done this? Why would someone take the time to help a family they had never met? She could not understand the reason, but she felt a deep sense of connection to the unknown giver. It was a reminder that kindness existed in the world, even in ways that were quiet, unexpected, and anonymous. The children, sensing the change in their mother's mood, smiled and laughed more freely. They were lighter in their steps, more playful, and more joyful. For the first time in weeks, the home felt like a place of ease rather than struggle. The woman felt a wave of relief wash over her. The burden of constant worry about food, which had weighed heavily on her shoulders, seemed a little lighter. She could provide a proper meal, and her children could enjoy it without thinking of scarcity. Throughout the day, the woman noticed small changes in her children's energy. They ran outside to play, their laughter echoing across the yard. They shared their food with each other, taking turns in showing appreciation for what they had. The mother watched them, smiling quietly to herself. She realized that the gift had done more than fill their stomachs. It had lifted their spirits, restored their sense of security, and reminded them of the goodness that could be found in the world. The woman took a moment to reflect on her own feelings. She had spent so much time focused on survival, on ensuring her children had what little she could provide, that she often forgot to allow herself moments of joy. But this gift, this simple basket of food, reminded her that life was also about small pleasures, about moments of kindness, and about the quiet ways in which people could show care for one another. She decided to keep the identity of the giver a secret, just as they had intended. She did not want to impose or ask for anything more. Instead, she chose to accept the gift with gratitude and humility, understanding that sometimes the best acts of kindness are those that are given without expectation or recognition. She wanted her children to see this lesson as well, to understand that generosity and compassion were values worth appreciating and carrying forward. As the day continued, the woman found herself planning meals that were more nourishing than usual. She added new ideas to her cooking, making the most of the fresh ingredients. The children helped where they could, chopping vegetables, stirring soups, and arranging plates. The home felt alive in a way it had not for some time. Laughter, chatter, and the clinking of utensils filled the air, creating an atmosphere of warmth, comfort, and family togetherness. The woman could see that this moment would have a lasting impact. It was not just about the food. It was about hope, trust, and the belief that even when life was difficult, there were people who cared. She felt inspired to continue doing her best, knowing that sometimes small gestures could change lives in profound ways. She realized that the kindness of a stranger had reminded her of the strength and resilience that already existed within her. As evening approached, the woman sat outside with her children, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple. The children played quietly nearby, their laughter mingling with the sounds of the evening. She reflected on the day, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the mysterious gesture that had brought so much light into their lives. She also thought about the lessons her children were learning. They were seeing firsthand that the world could be both harsh and beautiful, that there were people willing to help without expectation, and that even the smallest acts of kindness could have a ripple effect. She knew that these experiences would shape them, teaching them compassion, empathy, and gratitude. The woman prepared a simple dinner using the remaining contents of the basket, making sure that her children had plenty to eat. As they gathered around the table, she watched them with pride. She realized that this moment, this simple meal, was more than just nourishment. It was a reminder that love and care could manifest in unexpected ways. It was a reminder that life could offer moments of joy even amidst struggle, and that hope could be found in the kindness of others. That night, as the children slept soundly, the woman reflected on the day. She felt a quiet peace settle over her, a sense that the burdens of life were still present but somehow lighter. The basket had not only provided food, it had restored a sense of faith in the goodness of the world. She knew that the mystery of the giver would remain, and perhaps it was better that way. The anonymity of the gesture made it even more special, a lesson in humility, generosity, and the quiet impact one person could have on another's life. She resolved to continue doing her best for her children, inspired by the act of kindness she had received. She would work hard, care for her children, and face each day with courage, knowing that even small gestures could make a significant difference. And she would carry the memory of the basket with her, a reminder that life, while often challenging, was also filled with moments of unexpected joy and compassion. The next few days were different in the household. The children seemed lighter, happier, and more energetic. Meals were easier to prepare, and the sense of constant worry that had once filled the home had diminished. The woman felt a renewed sense of hope, a belief that the future could hold better days, and that kindness could come from places she might never anticipate. She understood that this gift was more than just food. It was a symbol of humanity, of connection, and of the quiet ways in which people could care for one another. And while the rancher remained unknown to them, his gesture left a permanent mark. It had changed their days, lifted their spirits, and created memories that would last a lifetime. The woman and her children had experienced firsthand the power of a single act of kindness, a reminder that even in difficult times, hope, love, and generosity could still prevail. Days turned into weeks, and life for the woman and her children slowly began to change, not in grand ways, but in small, meaningful moments. The memory of the basket of food, left so carefully at their doorstep, had become a quiet but powerful presence in their lives. Every time she prepared a meal or saw her children laughing freely, she was reminded that kindness existed in the world, even from strangers. It was a lesson she held close, a reminder that hope could arrive in the most unexpected ways. The woman began to notice subtle differences in the energy of her home. The children were more spirited and playful, their laughter carrying through the small house like a melody. Even the chores that had once felt overwhelming now seemed lighter, more manageable. There was a sense of calm that had not been there before, a reassurance that despite the challenges of life, they could endure, they could thrive, and they could find joy in the little things. The basket had done more than feed them. It had restored a sense of peace and security. She found herself thinking often about the unknown giver. Who could have done such a thing? Why had they taken the time to care for her family without asking for anything in return? She knew she might never learn the answers, and yet she felt grateful nonetheless. There was a profound beauty in the anonymity of the gesture. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness are those given without expectation or recognition, freely and purely, with no strings attached. Her thoughts of the rancher, though she did not know him personally, were accompanied by a deep sense of respect. She imagined a man who understood the struggles of others, who noticed the quiet battles people fought each day, and who was willing to act, even in small ways, to make a difference. She felt connected to him in spirit, even without ever having met him. That connection, though intangible, filled her with warmth and renewed her belief in the goodness of people. Life continued, and she adapted to her circumstances with renewed energy. The basket had given her more than food. It had given her a reminder of her own resilience and resourcefulness. She found ways to stretch the remaining provisions, creating meals that were both nourishing and comforting. The children helped eagerly, chopping vegetables, setting the table, and sharing the meals with gratitude. The home, once heavy with worry, now felt filled with hope, laughter, and a renewed sense of togetherness. The woman also began to notice changes within herself. She felt stronger, more confident, and more capable of facing the challenges that life presented. The quiet generosity she had received inspired her to look at her own life differently. She realized that while she could not control every hardship, she could control how she responded, how she nurtured her children, and how she preserved their happiness in the face of adversity. The basket had been more than sustenance. It had been a lesson in hope, humility, and the power of quiet compassion. As weeks passed, the woman shared her gratitude with her children in small, meaningful ways. She spoke to them about kindness, generosity, and the importance of helping others whenever possible. She wanted them to understand that acts of giving, no matter how small, could create ripples that extended far beyond the immediate moment. The children listened closely, their eyes wide with understanding, and slowly the values of empathy and compassion began to take root in their young hearts. Although the rancher never returned or revealed himself, his presence was felt in the quiet strength he had imparted. The woman often found herself reflecting on the lesson of the basket, the idea that one person, noticing a need, could make a difference in another's life. She carried this thought with her, using it as a guiding principle in her interactions with others. When neighbors needed help, she offered what she could. When her children faced small challenges, she reminded them of the kindness of strangers and the importance of passing that kindness forward. The children thrived in the environment their mother worked so hard to create. With nourishment and love, they grew stronger and more confident each day. School became a place of excitement rather than struggle, and they carried with them the lessons of gratitude and resilience that had been instilled at home. Even simple joys, a warm meal, a kind word, a moment of play, were appreciated more deeply because of the struggles they had faced and the kindness they had received. The woman often took walks with her children in the early morning, reflecting on the life they were building together. She noticed the beauty of the world in new ways. The sunrise casting golden light over the fields, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, the laughter of other children playing nearby. Each observation reminded her that life was a mixture of challenges and beauty, hardship and joy, struggle and kindness. The basket, though a small gesture in the grand scheme of the world, had opened her eyes to the balance of life and the quiet ways in which people could support one another. She thought about the future with cautious optimism. While she knew that life would continue to present obstacles, she felt more prepared to face them. The memory of the basket served as a source of motivation, a reminder that she was not alone in the world. There were people who cared, even if they were unseen. There were ways to find support, ways to nurture hope, and ways to create a life filled with love and resilience. As the seasons changed, the family continued to thrive. The mother found small ways to make life more comfortable, saving a little from each day's work, preparing meals that were both simple and nourishing, and creating a home filled with warmth and laughter. The children learned to appreciate the value of effort, the importance of gratitude, and the joy of sharing with others. They grew, not only in strength but in character, guided by the lessons of love and generosity they had experienced firsthand. Even though the rancher remained a mystery, the impact of his gesture was permanent. The mother often spoke to her children about the basket, not to create a story of dependency, but to illustrate the power of kindness and the importance of noticing the needs of others. She wanted them to understand that life was not just about receiving help, but also about giving it, and that even the smallest action could make a meaningful difference in someone's life. Over time, the woman found herself thinking less about scarcity and more about opportunity. She focused on building a life that balanced hard work with joy, responsibility with play, and challenge with hope. She knew that life would not always be easy, but the memory of the basket had taught her that even small gestures could carry immense significance. It had reminded her that the world, while sometimes harsh, was also filled with moments of unexpected goodness. In quiet moments, she would sit by the window and watch her children play in the yard. Their laughter echoed through the home, a melody of resilience and happiness. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that her efforts, combined with the kindness of a stranger, had created a home where her children could flourish. The basket had been more than food. It had been a spark that ignited hope, courage, and the enduring belief in human kindness. The rancher, though far away and unaware of the long-term impact of his actions, had unknowingly created a lasting ripple. His simple gesture had taught a family about generosity, restored a mother's faith in humanity, and inspired lessons in compassion that would be carried forward for generations. The woman and her children may never have known his identity, yet his kindness became an invisible thread weaving through their lives, connecting them to a world filled with unseen allies and quiet heroes. And as the years passed, the story of the basket became a memory that shaped who they were. The mother taught her children to be kind, generous, and aware of the struggles of others. They learned that even the smallest acts of giving could make a world of difference. And in this way, the rancher's gesture lived on, not in recognition or fame, but in the hearts and actions of those who had been touched by it. The woman often reflected on the lesson she had learned, that life was not just about enduring hardship, but about noticing the small opportunities to make a difference, to offer help, and to create moments of joy for those who needed it most. She carried this wisdom with her, guiding her choices, shaping her character, and influencing the upbringing of her children. And in doing so, she honored the quiet, selfless act that had changed their lives forever. Even as time went on, the basket remained a symbol of hope, of kindness, and of the quiet strength that comes from noticing the struggles of others. The woman and her children carried this symbol with them, not as a story of dependency, but as a reminder that compassion could exist anywhere, and that small gestures given freely could create profound and lasting change. And though the rancher never returned, never spoke, and remained anonymous, his act of generosity had created a ripple of love and hope that could never be erased. It had restored faith in humanity, strengthened the family, and left a lasting impression on hearts that would carry it forward for years to come. The basket had done more than provide food. It had nourished hope, resilience, and the understanding that even the quietest kindness could leave a permanent mark on the world,